very much. We had a question here.
Thank you. Ursula Oswald-Spring from Mexico. How to challenge the existing power structure for a paradigm shift? This is the problem. Interests are too big at the moment, still. And this means, do we need more human suffering? Do we need more destruction? Or can we have anticipative learning, preventive learning, adaptation, and resilience? And this has to do what Kate said. How can we abolish the development paradigm? Because it brought us only underdevelopment, hunger, and food crisis. So my process is, how can we conceal a new model where stakeholders, without any voice, ethically, can get a voice and can be involved in this process?
Okay, thank you very much. Another one here, as fast as you can. Thank you.
Yes. How to reframe the issues of social challenges of global change? We have scientized the issues for the last 30 years. We have politicized them for the last 15 or 17 years, and some of them are starting to securitize it. What does it mean? It means to declare issues of global environmental change, climate change, desertification, water stress, to issues of utmost importance that require extraordinary means for solution. Towards the transformation, we have heard from John Schellenhuber. But if we think that through, who is the threat? It's not the others, it's us, our economic behavior since the Industrial Revolution. And if we think that through, it does not mean a militarization of the environment. If we think it through, it may mean a demilitarization of security. So a fundamental rethinking of basic concepts of international relations and the consequences for political action.
Okay, thank you very much. Clear, there's one at the back there.
I tend to be very practical and while we're, and not that all these things aren't practical, but while we're working towards paradigm shift and reframing, let's do some really good meta-analyses, because I feel like we know stuff. And when, Roger, you say we need to deliver an integrated knowledge, I actually think we know a lot of stuff as social scientists, and our knowledge is scattered all over different journals and across disciplines, and I feel like if we could bundle it together to answer some of the questions that I know are going to be posed, we actually have more answers than we think we do.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll take one more over there.
Let me propose that it's not the right question to ask what are the most promising research questions. The question is, what are the problems that we need to work on? If we organize around problems, such as, how do we cut energy use by 25% real fast? Or Jim's, how do we get a sustainable water system in Arizona? There is research in that, and there's action in it, and you need to put the two of them together. These are questions that we can't wait a generation for the research to develop. We need to integrate now.
Okay, I think that's more than enough. We'll take those 6. I think the easiest way is, if anyone, I think we'll go round, and probably those people who feel able to answer one of those or 2 of those questions do so, rather than address it to everybody else. I think that's probably the best way of doing it. So Kate, maybe if you could start, is there any of those questions that sort of grabbed you?
Okay, thank you. Some very, very challenging questions. I guess there's a couple of questions that I'd like to address, which is, in a way, how we as a community of social science researchers can actually address these sort of these changes in morals and changes in values, really, because I think that actually we've almost gone too far in the service of policy, of actually thinking that we have to speak directly to policy. And the way in which we've engaged with policy, I think, has very often put us as researchers sort of, almost within the kind of, the power of policymakers or whatever. And I think that we've been, again, too focused on looking at the incremental ways in which we can change behavior. So, tinkering with the instruments and the policy to make it work. Whereas actually, I think how we should be contributing is to think about, well, how do societies change their values that enable some of these, sort of really profound shifts, to happen. And I think that we've also shied away from that, in recent decades, because we've been very concerned with looking as if we're involved in sort of social engineering and things like that. But I think that actually we have to now engage in a real sort of understanding of how we change values in order to support these sort of transformations. So I hope that answers, or partially answers, a couple of the points
I think it
made.
partially answers, so I'll try and make sure that they all get answered in the course. Roger.
Okay, very quickly. It would be nice to have a lengthy discussion about the question, what do we know as a human dimensions community? I really like the idea of doing meta-analyses and doing a much better job than we've done in the past of assembling what we do know into usable form and trying to communicate that. On the other hand, the thing that worries me a lot about where the human dimensions community is that there's going to be lots of money to do applied pragmatic things and to inform policy. And what we're going to find out is in many areas, and let me take the case of adaptation. I think we know really little about adaptation and how to make it work. And yet there's a huge demand right now. And adaptation work is going to go on, it's going to be funded, and we're going to do a lot of lousy stuff on adaptation out there in the world. And so I'm really concerned about the balance between sort of applied, pragmatic policy work, which is going to be funded endlessly over the next couple of decades, and the basic social science, theoretical, conceptual, analytical work, which is not going to be done. And the result of that is going to be, over the next couple of decades, we're going to do a lot of bad things.
Okay, Oren?
Let me just make one comment, which I think is inspired by several of the questions. I think we face the challenge of trying to strike a proper balance between being a subversive science and a usefully applied science. At one level, I think we have a kind of responsibility almost to challenge the status quo, to be contributing to inform social criticism, to be saying why the status quo in this particular area may be leading us straight to disaster. On the other hand, I think there's something to be said for a comment that Gernot made, and the question I would have later on is to something that Jim said about contextualizing. I think there is actually room for applied science. I'm not quite as pessimistic as Roger about we know nothing, but I think it's probably very useful to be very thoughtful and conscious about the limits of what we do know.
Okay, Nicole, any of those questions that really grabbed you?